It's a my honor and privilege to be able to join you for lunch today and to talk about some things. Um, as you might guess from what's on the wall, I will probably talk a little about Ensign Peak Foundation. I think I'd like that to be the focus, and I'm just I have a PowerPoint that will kind of guide our discussion, and I'm going to scramble through some things, and I'll probably move a little more slowly through things. I believe that open forum in a group this size is okay. And if any of you would like to contradict me on any issue, including the veracity of that introduction, please. The dairy farm part is indisputable. Any of you who were raised on a dairy farm, you know, you can never exactly wash off the smell. So that will be not in dispute. Anyway, let's just kind of go to work and see where this goes. I don't know how many of you would really know our organization, the Ensign Peak Foundation. We began life there, and I'll talk a little about how we became Mormon Historic Sites Foundation. And then when that became unacceptable words, we just reverted back to Ensign Peak Foundation. I'll maybe just mention one thing. When we returned to our roots, people know there was Ensign Peak Foundation. We doing okay here? I can talk a little louder. Are we doing okay? Okay. That's better. Thank you. I should say that I started getting phone calls from people like all over the world, from London, people who wanted to help us invest our $100 billion that the news reported we had. That we're confusing it apparently with Ensign Peak Advisors. That's the church's organized committee years after hours. We have claims to the priority on the table. Anyway, let's talk about a little about the foundation if we can. This will be a little boring. I'm going to figure I'm the least electronically astute person you know, unless it's you, because I'm definitely a lot of fresh air here. I think you probably have. This is our mission statement. The Ensign Peak Foundation is an independent organization whose mission is to identify, preserve, and commemorate sites, events, and people in the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints throughout the world. There are a couple of things that I report to, and that is the word independent organizations. We are not the church. We are faithful, we are lying, but the church does what it does, and it can't do everything, and there are a lot of things that it just simply can't do and probably shouldn't do, but that an independent organization that is aligned with it can accomplish. And so as we go through, I'll chat about that a little bit. Here's our group. Don't be frightened, but there are 4 lawyers involved here. Kim Wilson, sheriff. Richard Lambert was here in the Avenues, and he is a retired federal prosecutor. Jeff Walker was in private practice and still is a lawyer. And Mike Hutchings, a district judge, retired, and then a real estate developer. Joining us on the board are Steve Bain, who's a businessman, Rob Clark, who's also a lawyer. We have a couple of historians, Gareth Dirtmont and Steve Harper, both of whom are professors of history in the church history of doctrine as part of the BYU. Penny Mays, I call him the amazing Penny Mays, was a church education system employee, taught until his retirement. He Institute program. He's an amazing chronicler and photographer who just donated to the church 70,000 images of church history sites available to the public. Heidi Swinton will be a stranger to no one. The biographer. President Wilson, author of many other books and much good work. And Rick Turley, who as a young lawyer received a phone call from Frankie Oaks and who invited him to leave the practice of law and become a historian. And so he worked in the church history department, assistant church historian for decades, was responsible for family history and ultimately public affairs. So he's a consummate church servant. In order to do what we do kind of three things: reduce the historical program, reduce the publication, and reduce the recognition. Let me talk about the first thing that we did, and I wonder what happened to that wonderful calendar that I had. So make sure, oh, there it is on the floor. With somebody who's yellow, I can bend over and doesn't have two new titanium knees. Get that for me. That's the last time I'm going to have to. I lived in the avenues for many years, and in the early 1990s, I received a call to the High Council in the Ensign stake from President Mark Benson, who is the son of President Everett Benson. And he sat me down and gave me my ward assignment and my auxiliary assignment. And he said, I understand you're a smart lawyer. And I said, well, I'm a lawyer. And he said, I'm going to ask you to do something that's kind of an offline, informal assignment. He said, nothing more than this. Go over and do something about Ensign people. So I did ask him if he'd made some promise to somebody or had a dream or something, but I never did. So I immediately, we were on this side of the City Creek, and I immediately went over the Cross City Creek Canyon to the base of Ensign Peak and became acquainted with a number of folks that lived in that area. Jay Hessler, who was a photographer at the Deseret News, and then the editor of the Church News, and president of Salt Lake State for a while. Ron Walker, who is a historian at Steve Wagner. Glenn Saxton, who was a developer and who a few decades later became my brother-in-law. And a few others. And later at the base of them, and they were concerned about, they knew the history, and they were concerned about preserving it. So I don't know what this group knows about Ensign Peak, but here's the short course. You probably already know this. After the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph, leadership fell on Brigham Young and the flood. And they were faced with an immediate problem, and that was the expulsion of tens of thousands of people and need to take them and go somewhere. In the as early as the early 1830s, there had been some discussion that at some point in time, the saints would go to Rocky Mountains and mighty people. Long. That's probably publicized, but I'm sure that was in the back of some people's mind. But Brigham was faced with the problem: where are you going to go? Well, there were then GPS coordinates. There weren't any maps, there wasn't any topography, and this was the West was unexplored and untrained on everything. So Brigham, as he's struggled with the idea of what I'm going to do, and be very careful. Joseph came to Brigham and gave him a vision of the valley. He gave him a vision of a little landmark that he might identify at some future time when he gave him. And he showed him Ensign Peak and said, build your city where the Ensign falls, flag into that. And the saints will have peace and prosperity. That's pretty well documented in the new church history of the church. At this time, Ensign Peak had kind of fallen out of the consciousness. So I met these good brethren, and we got together a few times and talked about what we might do with Ensign Peak. What we found was the top 3 acres at the top of the peak was in Salt Lake City ownership. Everything else pretty well was in private ownership in the hands of developers. And you know what happens in this town, and that is on the grounds and stuff on the and access to the top of the peak is very difficult. There really wasn't public access. You kept people around the back. So that was what we decided that we would try to do something about Ensign Peak, bring it back. And so we, in 1992, about a year, that was, I think, 32 years ago, I filed the papers and formed Ensign Peak Foundation. Over the next few years, we did a variety of things. We were able to conduct some land swaps and secure 70 acres into one parcel into the Salt Lake City ownership. We were able to put in place an open space agreement, which assured that this will always be a historical park. It will never be private development. And the road that runs right here gets a drive, and we were able to pull some lots out of development and make those available so that there was access now to 70 acres of Ensign Peak and an opportunity to preserve and tell the story that I just told you about. The rest of the story is, so when Brigham and the first group of pioneers were working their way to the west, Brigham had not declared where Sage was going to settle. And people were starting to get annoyed because they didn't see his brother was working pretty hard and others were. And Brigham said, I'll know it when I see it, but I don't know. So in other words, election. On the afternoon of July 24th, 1947, the Overturn came out on the bench. And immigration came with journalists, carried around, gazed upon the valley, saw a little gumdrop shape, as he described it, a little gumdrop shape hill off in the distance. It's not visible from very many places. And said, just like that he went down to the first stopping point He pointed up to the beach and said, I want to go there. That was Saturday afternoon. Sunday, they prepared their harness, got their breath a little bit first thing on the morning of leave. And the other 5 apostles who were in that first group, and 3 of them, my first order of business, the Sam's and Cyprus, where they gathered. Some reported they saw them on the circle. They recorded raising an insight. They shed their pioneers, their leathery complexions, and their ragged clothes, and their woolly boots, and became prophets and revelators, and conscious of their callings and the prophecies of Isaiah, raised polka dot handkerchief on a king, raised an inside and furtherance of Brother Joseph's instruction to build their city where the ensign falls. A few days later, at the absolute first piece of flat ground at the base of Ensign Creek, when it's Canadian ground, anyway, so that's what Ensign Peak's about. So over the next few years, we did a lot of consulting. We met first every month, and then we met every week, then we met every day. And as we raised money, engaged landscape architects, consulted with people, and constructed Ensign Peak Park. In 1835, this monument was erected at the top of the peak. And on July 26, 140 years from the day that Gregor first said this is the place, right now, President Gordon Lee dedicated Ensign Peak Park, and we turned over the keys to Salt Lake City. 70 acres, trail, doesn't look like anything's there, so much other than the entry closet. And a chance for us to tell that story of faith and revelation. And, there are a lot of beautiful valleys, canyons. Each one of them has a beautiful stream. And, but because of that particular instruction, Brigham chose and so City Creek. So that was our first little project. Now, as we spent a long time together, and we raised about $1 million. We've done this pretty good thing. We were all slapping ourselves on the back and saying, well, we have to easy at Kmart. And then one of our groups said, I wonder if we have learned anything that might be of value in other places. So we agreed to meet one more time, and we decided that maybe there would be a place for an independent organization to do some other things with regard to church history, and kind of rescue some stories and help the church tell its story, stories of faith and so forth. So we immediately turned our thoughts to Kirtland, which was another project that needed some attention. And we adopted the broader name of Mormon Historic Sites Foundation. So here's what we found at Kirtland. This is Kirtland Village. For those of you who've been to Kirtland, this is the road that runs up to the Temple Road up the hill. This is the Whitney store. This is the Whitney home. This did not exist. And this was a problem child. There were tens of thousands of cars that went past that road every day, as people commuted from Cleveland to their homes in southern. And one could hardly visit. Pardon?
Is that covered land?
No, that's now church ground. But this was the trouble crossing intersection. This is the triangle, and it was a traffic snarl, a traffic rest. Plus, you couldn't visit the Whitney store without taking your life in your hands, and you couldn't conduct a conversation because of all the screeching tires and so forth. So it's hardly a place that one could visit. The city of Kirtland knew that it had some issues. There's something interesting about the taxation system in Ohio, and that is local governments don't have taxing authority. As getting revenue, they basically function with grants. The city of Kirtland does not have a public sewer system. And so to do anything with that road problem, required them to have Ohio state funds, and the projections were 20 to 30 years before it was priority. But the church felt like it would like to do something about this. So we became involved as an independent organization, and it was proposed that basically these roads be abandoned and that new roads be abandoned roads be put here and require the building of 2 new bridges across the Chagrin River. And so we partnered with the church and made this all happen. The city of Kirtland, it's a whole other story. All of these things have hour-long stories. So ultimately, the city of Kirtland came to approve this plan. But they did require that we deposit $3 million, the cost of the project, into a joint account. It was the privilege of Ensign Peak Foundation to have a joint account with Kirtland, City of Kirtland. We each had signature authority over the checks. We were able to secure those funds, fundraising, and we're participatory in this. The first check I wrote, amazingly enough, was to pay some engineers to send somebody out in hip waders and stand in the Chagrin River and count fish for the environmental impacts. Okay. So, but what we ultimately were able to do, this project required building of 2 new bridges, new fences and walls, parking lots, new roads, asphalt bridges, bearings, line. But this was what it made possible. That area now was devoid of traffic. Traffic was all going around. It's now just walking space, and so that allowed the church to build a new visitor center. So we can go back. I can figure out how to do this. There's our infrastructure. And this is what we were able to open the door for the church to do. Build a visitor center. Johnson Dam needed some archaeological digs, and they found a cannery, hatchery, and that. So again, at the completion of this project, we were able to participate, and the president deeply dedicated the Kirtland Village, the Kirtland Flat development, which is now feasible. Well, we did that, and we thought that was kind of cool. And so we looked around for some other things. I'm an Idaho boy, and this is a picture of the Oneida State Academy in Preston. When Edmunds Tucker Act was enacted, one of the things that it did was disenfranchise the states. They couldn't vote and serve on public boards, which means they lost control of public education. Church Commissioner of Education, under direction of the First Presidency, sent a letter to each of the states and said, we'd like your help. Would you please consider creating educational institutions? And that was what brought about the creation ultimately of 33 academies from Canada to Mexico. A couple of them kind of stand out, like this Brigham Young Academy, control what became BYU, and the Rich Academy, and I think he won so forth there. So, but a few of them are like, this is my hometown of Preston or near there. So I was conscious of this. I actually attended woodshop there when I was in junior high. My mother attended school there. They built a high school, the Napoleon Dynamite High School, right in front of it. And the school board determined that this building was a liability, and they said, we'll take it down. It's a beautiful building. It was built with the blood, sweat, tears of the saints. Their faith is in every rock which they had quarried and built on their own paper. And it was a risk of being involved. It was significant for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which is a couple of our Idaho prophets, Ezra mentioned, and Harold B. Lee, are along the south, on either mistaken School of the Prophets. So we undertook this little project. Through the efforts of many people, I think primarily do that out on the state, we were able to conceive that we were going to move this baby, and it required some thought and a lot of attention, and particularly a lot of money. So here we are breaking ground on a plot of ground in something called Benson Park, which is 2 or 3 blocks. It's actually 3 blocks from the location of the academy. And here's what we did. Here's what a $1,110,000. So that was the first check. There was what you do when you have a almost 2,000 ton Pioneer unreinforced sandstone structure. You saw it up its foundation first, and then you slip it in a little metal plate, and then you jack it up, and then you jack it up, and you some more stuff, and you jack it up. And then you put in about a tons of reinforced steel underneath it as its new foundation, and then you erect. You bring in 38 individually controlled, pneumatically controlled wheel structures. And that's how you can kind of lift and move a old building around and kind of play with it. And I held my breath the whole time that we jacked it up, turned it around, rolled it down the hill. It got to the bottom, it didn't collapse. And then we moved it a few blocks over to Tunica. Anyway, one more little project. I'm just going to scramble through this and see. I'm in deep trouble on time. But there's a lot of projects and things that need attention. All across the hospital, recognized that as a decommissioned Catholic chaplain for Salt Lake Regional Hospital. Needed some attention, and one of the projects that we had been involved in was trying to preserve that. It's complicated by the fact that hospitals are private ownership. We supported a variety of things. The Saints were the first colonizers in Las Vegas. There's the old Las Vegas fort, and we participated in some refurbishing of the dedication of that, and we commissioned the painting of this original painting by Ken Corbett. And then we found out that we had got the flag wrong, and so we sent him and his paintbrush on the plane down to Las Vegas to paint the flag on it. Are any of you, are you any of your descendants of Icelandic saints? You're unusual because there are more, I think there are 300,000 saints. Here's a story, and history is, there's no end to it, and they're making some today. But here's a story of two brothers. There's a little island off the south coast of Iceland called Hagen. The city is best in air fishing desert. And two of the fishing young men decided they would go to Denmark, where they would undertake well, something, you know, they were apprenticed. One was going to be goldsmith and so forth. But they met up with the early Mormon missionaries and were converted and left their apprenticeships and returned to their native village. Of about 1,000 people on this little island. And they were able to convert over time through much opposition about half the island. And over some decades, about half the island disappeared. They left and immigrated to Utah, gathered in Spanish. They kept their culture, their language, their traditions there. But how do you explain where, you know, half of everybody left, you know, when they left? And but it was well documented. And so the Icelandic saints are very tied to that zodiac faith and very aware of these immigrants who came and established Utah. And so President Hinckley became very good friends with President Grimson of the President of Iceland. And we had an opportunity to participate in doing some Icelandic things in being Spanish forward. But tell me what country would love to have a museum about the church and about the people who are affiliated with it. The people in Iceland do, and so we have the privilege of creating this museum exhibit on an investment there, Iceland. This is me cutting ribbon. We were there a couple of times. And so we have pictured 300 or so saints in their pioneer get-up. They were fishermen, but they're now pioneers. And we have an opportunity to tell the story. I'm a descendant of Pond's Mill. People, McBride is in the well. And so we've worked for many years with Pond's Mill. We worked directly with the community of press for a period of time, and ultimately, I think, had a hand in the church being able to acquire that property. And so we continue to work on that. There are just 1,000 stories in church history. In 1912, in the Mexican colonies, the Mexican Revolution, the saints were there living peacefully. They got in the crossfire, literally, where there were the two competing political parties and the rebels in Mexico City. We disarmed them and vied for their allegiance, and there was no choice but for them, 4,000 of them virtually, to abandon their homes in the colonies and go to El Paso. So El Paso, which was a big town in those days, within 4,000 people virtually overnight. And they entertained them, housed them as best they could. So on the 100th anniversary of that, we took the opportunity to go say thanks to the people of El Paso and remind them of what their forefathers and ancestors had done, taking in these needy refugees. And so over a period of a few days, we did some meetings and historical seminars, museum exhibit, we made a film, and we replayed the original program the Fort Bliss Army Band had played 100 years before. The same, different members, but the same. Anyway, we have kind of an approach that we take when we do projects. Here's another, and I'm going to quickly dizzy through these. the Illinois Supreme Court has an educational program which they conduct every year. They select a law case and they highlight it, and they create a program which goes out to every high school student in Illinois to instruct them in law. They selected the story of Joe Smith and his 3 habeas corpus cases. And because we are not a church, we are an independent organization, we could partner with folks in the Illinois Supreme Court and bring about, and we effected 3 days of programs. President Oaks participated in ceremonies there in Springfield, highlighting these events. In 1611, King James Version of the Bible was created. King James called together some people that he called translators. They were people, the best and the brightest people, and he saw there were various versions of the Bible. He instructed them to break up into groups to basically create a translation from original manuscripts of the Bible. We have the King James Bible on its 400th anniversary. We on our own, without consulting with anybody, thought that we should research and know and highlight the work of these 30 plus translators who worked for many years, giving us the beautiful Bible that we rely upon. So we sent our researchers and our photographers over to England, and they researched many of these original translators. And we created a website with their work. We've done a variety of markers here and there. There are a couple of Fairport Harbor. I can't say it when you're from Utah. You can't say Fairport. You have to say Fairport Harbor, which is north. We've done markings along the Mormon Trail in Iowa and Utah, Lee County. This is a museum exhibit in Kansas City talking about the road design and the role of the Missouri River in there. Home of Nathaniel Felt on the campus of the Peabody Axis Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. That was in the home of Nathaniel Felt that Brigham Young was staying when he received word of the martyrdom of the Prophet Joe. And so he was a good and faithful member, and we noted that. We erected a statue of the Prophet Joseph temporarily in Manhattan near Wall Street. We've erected a somewhat duplicate or twin to the Kannapolis handcart statue that's on Temple Square at the beginning of the handcart trail, Iowa City. One at the beginning of here. I spent a few days in Beaubert Island and so forth. So we also done some documentary productions, some films. Here's one on the wreck of the Julianne. This involves some immigrating saints. Here are some others. Bright lights in the desert in Las Vegas, Teton Dam disaster, and the Ocean's running virtual tours in England. One of the stories that's really crucial, and this is akin to that one in El Paso, and that is when the saints were driven out of Missouri, they had nowhere to go. Quincy, the people of Quincy, welcomed the saints with open arms. Sheltered them to the best they could. Sometimes, swelling the population of their communities. And somebody needed to thank them. And we have created a nice exhibit in the museum in Quincy, Illinois, to recognize and thank the people of Illinois for those original services. Well, there were some other things, and there's one in Kauai, the original gathering place on Lanai, which ultimately was abandoned in favor of Laie. And in Tonga and the Wisconsin pineries, the Saints were called up there to harvest timber and float it down to the Nauvoo or the Mississippi River to build the Nauvoo Temple. We publish a journal, Latter-day Saint Historical Studies, twice a year. We've sponsored some publications, Hans Mill, one on the Icelandic saints, Campbell in the deserts, of the Las Vegas story and Hawaii and mapping Mormonism and so forth. We also hold the research of Richard Anderson, who spent his lifetime researching the life of Oliver Cowdery, and at some point in time when we get some time, we're going to complete a definitive work on that. We also have helped a little bit with fundraising, and it was our privilege to deliver a $2.7 million check to the church for the remodel of the Church History Museum one day. The church, some things they can do on their own, some things they do better if it's not the church, and so we have a close relationship with the Church History Department. This is one of our number attending a document auction in New York, where some documents the church wished to go for, but didn't necessarily wish to do it visibly and in their name. We were able to acquire that and effect a donation of a few $100,000 worth of historical documents. Okay, well, I'm going to just scrabble through here, and sorry for the scattered nature of this, but it'll give you a little flavor of what we've been able to do the last 30 years or so. Junius Wells is not a name that rolls off most people's tongues, but he's sort of the father of church historic sites. He was an assistant church historian. He sort of had a vision about what you could do. He was involved in acquiring the property and had the vision to erect the monument at the graveside of Oliver Cowdery and David Whitworth. Let's see, Oliver Cowdery, I guess, in Richmond, Missouri. But he's best known for his work in acquiring the Sharon property and erecting the monument of the birthplace of the prophet Joseph in Sharon. So we have named an award after him, which we give periodically to those who have performed extraordinary service in the interest of church history. Our first recipient was President Hinckley. I'll just skip through. It's Carl Anderson, who spent his lifetime serving and helping to bring about the church's presence in Kirtland. Elder Ballard, President Ballard, is honored for his work on the Sesquicentennial. Doug Smoot almost single-handedly rescued the Brigham Young Academy, now the Provo City Library. Florence Jacobson is a name that, again, may not be well known to you, but she was the young women's president who, when she learned that the next day, learned from President Wilson, the next day, the bulldozers were going to come in and level the lighthouse for a parking lot. She almost literally laid down in front of the bulldozer and said, "Over my dead body," and persuaded the brethren to take another look. And so responsible for preserving the lighthouse. Richard Bushman is well known. Marlon Jetson, Scott Warner for his work in Montana or in Wyoming. Richard's really, so we've done some special recognitions for Wilford Wood and Dean Jesse, who conceived the Joseph Smith, Ron Aspen, who served faithfully. So I want to talk about really just two things, and we'll see if I can cover just these items. This is a monument erected in the city cemetery or the Pine Grove Cemetery in Topsfield, Massachusetts. Anybody been to Topsfield? Is that a little familiar with that? When George A. Smith, Councilor Brigham Young, returned from his mission or travels to the Middle East with Eliza R. Snow and others, he stopped off in Topsfield, and in honor of his ancestors, because he was a Smith descendant, he erected this monument to his ancestors who lived in or were interred in this cemetery. It was a long monument. It became a little hard to read. You didn't know much about what it was. But in 2005, our foundation were able to partner with the Topsfield Historical Society. You can do some stuff if you're not the church that you couldn't do if you were the church. And so we erected at the homestead where the Smith family home was, and I'll tell you a little more about that. We erected that. That's now a beautiful New England home, by the way, beautiful estate. But that's where generations of Smiths were. This is one that's kind of fun. I'm not sure who can get away with erecting a nice monument or plaque to the prophet Joseph Smith on the grounds of the Congregational Church in Topsfield, but you can do it. And so in 2005, President Ballard, we spent a few days there in Topsfield. We dedicated these two monuments. And then time passed, and this little monument still persisted there in the cemetery. Unreadable, mostly unknown. And we thought we would like to have that cleaned so that you could see what it said. And so we approached the cemetery board, and they said, over our dead bodies, first of all, and then over a little time, because we had made friends with the Topsfield Historical Society and a few phone calls and so forth, they changed their tune and they said, well, you can clean that, but are you sure you don't want to do something more? And so they approved, and Ensign Peak Foundation, during COVID in 2020, conceived, designed, and erected this monument to the 5 generations of Smiths. Here they're listed. Robert Smith came from England and settled in 1638. His son Samuel I. So Robert lived in Topsfield. Samuel I lived in Topsfield. Having 2 lived in Topsfield. Asel lived in Topsfield. Joe Smith Sr. lived in Topsfield. 5 generations of the prophet Jonah. First 5 generations of Americans. This is where they incubated their faith until it's time to call the prophet. Of course, then Joe Sr. went over to Sharon where the prophet was born. So we were able to dedicate that to the COVID. As is our practice, we just aren't content to do a monument. What we'd like to do is tell some history and raise some awareness. And so here we are with an evening program. Here's the completed monument. It could have been something bigger, but it had to be right size. What it is, it's in a 400-year-old structure. And so here we are at that bottom right photograph is kind of give you a little vision about what that cemetery is like. And so in May of 2022, once open, that task at least is started. President Ballard joined us again, and Sidewalk Cemetery, we dedicated this, and you'll see that we incorporated that little old 1873 one from downtown, beautiful footballs, honoring the ancestors of the property. Well, there's one other kind of fun thing that these guys here are delivering a baby grand piano in the middle of a 400-year-old cemetery. They were able to get it off the gully and plug down and tune just as we rose to begin the dedication ceremony. Okay, well, here's what I really think we can talk about, and that is all of this is what we've been up to over the years, all scattered. When you look in the rearview mirror, there were quite a few things that I've been brought about. Yes, as we have taken the opportunity to try to tell some history. Now, the Jones Smith papers, there's certainly been much said about that. Larry and Miller, one story that they became introduced to the possibilities here. Over 20 years, they financially supported this project, which concluded last fall with the publication of 27 print volumes of the collected papers of Joseph Smith. It's an incredible work, incredibly important to telling authentic and verifiable history. So here we are as we have celebrated that 20-year anniversary and completion of the project. It was the intent, I think, in the beginning to do something with the legal papers. Joseph, but there is no print volume on that. It's sort of an incomplete project. On the day that we talked about completing that project, President Oaks announced that the first presidency had commissioned Richard E. Curley, who's our friend and colleague of decades now. And he doesn't spell his name Richard E. Turkey. He doesn't. He spells it Richard E. Curley. I'll put that in. This is incredible, where he will tell the authoritative story of the prophet Joseph. The base will be the Jones Smith papers. It's on the sale document. But there is a missing piece, and that is the legal papers of Joseph. It's been my personal observation that one of the tools the adversary used to try to thwart the work and slow it down was the legal system and the law. And the prophet Joseph, almost every day of his life, they faced stiff legal rules, incarcerated, church, murder, everything. And so you can't tell the story of the prophet Joseph without telling the story of how he did what he did in the face of daily serious opposition. We have identified about 300 individual law cases that the prophet Joseph touched in one way or another. He was a judge of not willing so at any rate, that story needs to be told. And so by assignment of the first presidency, the Encyclopedia Foundation has undertaken a 4-year comprehensive papers document to do what the legal Joseph papers did with everything else. And that is document in an unassailable fashion legal prophet Joseph. There'll be 5 volumes to cover those 4 periods. So we engage, and we have really 4 full-time historians, each of whom has editorial experience on the Jones Smith papers. So they're working today along with the group of archivists and researchers. And so That's what we're up to. Well, a couple of closing remarks. The importance of church history, well, I think we all know and appreciate. President Hinckley was one of the great advocates of history, never forget. I'm one who believes in commemorating the great events of the past. When we do so, we bring life into the word men and women, bring to life men and women history who did significant things which we same thing from President Wilson. Committed today as ever to preserve history. President Nelson has been busy doing a lot of things like repairing parks and so forth. It's his privilege to dedicate the language life to that's been committed again the church to the mission of remembering. So that's the story, sort of in a nutshell. So it's been my privilege and opportunity over the years to just do a little of this and that, and when you look at the rearview mirror, there have been some significant things, many of which probably could not have occurred without the attention of a group of folks who are not acting particularly under the direction of the church, hand in hand with the church, and telling the significant stories, preserving the places around the country and around the globe where you can take your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids and build testimony and tell them stories, faith, and commitment. This is kind of a little personal view, but it was testing that we're in the blending. People are not going to know adversity personally, as we do. And they're going to have to do it. They're going to have to know the sacrifices that people made for their family. So that's my story. I didn't leave any time for questions. And many of you are still awake. Thank you for this. Talk a little about something that's very close to me. And so we're going to go into retirement. You know what we're going to be doing for the next 4 years. So thank you for your attention. I'd really be happy to answer any questions or just visit with you if you have any questions. Okay, there's always a question there. Yes.
My wife Linda and I, in 2017, when we studied church history and doctrinal covenants, decided during the summer on several different trips to go to 30 different church history sites and enhance our study firsthand. We did it again 4 years later, in 2021. We're going to do it again next year. And besides the church-owned and operated sites, we found many of these wonderful places, homes that people had preserved. Ezra Lysgar Snow's home, the Colesville branch, their property and home, privately operated. We've been to the majority of the ones you've mentioned here. We're eyewitnesses to how enhancing, how strengthening it is to be at these sites. And we want to personally thank you because they're wonderful. And it's affected us. We're eyewitnesses to your work. I'm from El Paso. I can tell you stories about that in the Mormon colonies. And I interviewed Rick Turley's grandfather in 1995 in the Mormon colonies. And he told us of getting on the train with Pancho Villa and going up to El Paso. And so these are all real things that strengthen our testimonies and preserve this history. So personally, I want to thank you, my wife and I want to thank you for your work, that it's real. So thank you.